updates as far as I shared on the radio show. I think most of you guys heard those. Both guys are Gene's making progress. Expect his return shortly. Not exactly sure yet. It's going to depend on how practice goes. Obviously, a couple days of prep here following Saturday. It's going to be important for us. This is a good Maine team. They won at Boston College. There was a tight game in the second half against Nebraska. And we know Nebraska, I think, has had some really impressive wins this year. So it's a good team. Their net ranking, I think, validates that. Got the older, stronger guys, well coached, good team. So we'll need to have a couple good days of prep.
If you do get Gene back soon, how does that impact rotation? Where does he fit into when you've got guys that through 10 games have kind of maybe solidified a few things?
Yeah, I think it's at this point it'd be just kind of speculation. I mean, he plays either wing spot, Adam, kind of the 3-4, which are pretty similar in our system. So he also gives us the ability, if we want to play smaller, maybe a little bit faster on occasion, to just play three of those guys together. So his versatility and length, he can guard bigger guys, he can guard smaller guys. I think will really help this team. So there's certainly a place for him, but it's too early to tell kind of yet.
And I thought your answer after the game about ice with mental injuries as opposed to physical injuries was pretty honest, pretty open. And when you're helping a guy come back from something like that, as a coach, like, how do you think you've come along as maybe you've gone through your career as far as helping guys through those situations? Because I'm sure you want what's best for him. You also need him to be your best version of yourself. Yeah. How do you approach those situations with a player who's going through things like that, where you're trying to help them, but I'm sure you also do want him back at some point?
Yeah, I think I think today's athlete, there's certainly more awareness. I think there's more honesty with athletes. There's more openness with athletes and coaches than there's ever been. And that's, I think, a good thing. That's a really good thing. It's a healthy thing. And I think when you go through some of just the traumatic things that have happened with people he cares about, that can bring to the surface some things that maybe he's struggled with. So I really want it to be his story. So I want to be careful what I say and how much I say, because it's really his story. But just generally, I think you guys know how I feel, how I think pretty much every coach at this school feels about just encouraging a level of honesty when it comes to all that stuff. So.
Coach, back on Gene, just before his injury, how much growth did you see him make kind of over the offseason? I know last year you talked a lot about him potentially playing a big role for this team this year.
Yeah, I did. His offseason was taken away because of some other minor injuries. So I think when we saw him, it was exciting because we were able to see some things that we felt like could help our group, and just some of the versatility that he provides. We were able to switch in some cases 3 through 5. We did that at Michigan last year. To be able to have a guy where you can switch, has that switchability is a good thing for you. So I think it was exciting, but to be honest with you, he had a really kind of truncated off season. So hopefully we can get him back, and I think our team needs him. I know our team needs him, and we're excited to get him back when we can.
And then I know, talking about kind of the timeline for him to return and stuff like that, you said, that's the medical staff and not something you necessarily get involved with.
Yeah.
But I just wonder, with the concussion issue, and he had one last year too, right? Where he missed a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Is any part of him, missing 10 plus games because of this have to do with the Kyle Young situation with his repeated concussions or anything like that?
No. You'd have to ask him, but I don't think so. I don't think at all. I think I don't want to say he's only, but it was his second one. I don't think he's had a history of them. Kyle kind of had a number of them. So I don't think that played into it at all, but you'd have to ask him.
Hi, Chris.
Hey,
With a day to digest what happened in New York City, when you think about the game, what's your big takeaway now? You had to lead the game, played pretty well, got the game to overtime, big clutch shot at the end.
Yeah.
Good things.
Yeah.
But what's your big takeaway from that game, and where do you go from there?
Yeah, I think, Jared, as much as anything, you're like any game at this point in the season, you're saying, okay, hey, what did we do well? Where have we improved from the prior game, from the Rutgers game to the Carolina game? How can we continue to improve in those areas? And then what do we need to clean up? I mentioned on the radio show, looking back on it, there's a lot of things I'd talk about, but initially having more extending our pressure in the full court, I think would have been something late that we need to just execute that better by putting Justice down the floor a little bit to prevent that half-court pass. That and then we have not seen a lot of press this year. What we saw against Cincinnati, we handled very well. What we've seen against other teams, we've really handled well. This was the first time we really struggled with it, and they're good at it. So that'd be the other thing we've got to get better with.
The other question I had leaving that game is, you've already had 2 situations this year, late game situations, where you've put the ball in a freshman's hands, and he's confidently taken the ball, and in the case of this last game, he put the ball in the hole. What's your confident? Obviously, you're confident in him. My curiosity is, how did he earn it? What has he done to show you that in those late game situations, even as a young player, he's uniquely maybe capable in those moments?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think what sometimes people forget about is most of all these scenarios we have went over a number of times in practice, defensively and offensively. Like we're not guessing in those situations what we're going to do on either end. It's already been discussed in the off season. It's already been planned on. There's rationale behind it. So we knew without a timeout where we were going to go in that situation. It's one of 2 or 3 things, but there was about 16 seconds on the clock by the time Bruce got it. And if you were there, you heard it was loud. It was a loud crowd. It was a road type environment. So there needed to be a hand signal from the bench, and it needed to be simple enough that our guys could execute it. We talked about maybe an adjustment he could make from the Rutgers game off of a similar action. He did make an adjustment. We'll have to have different things we run. It's not like we're going to be in a lot of close games. I don't think we can run the same thing every time. But I guess to your question, you learn that by going through those scenarios in practice. And then we'll adjust if we feel like, hey, we went to him in Justice really late. People think just because he scored it, we went to him and Justice had a big finish. So those were the 2 guys we were going through, but it'll be a number of guys we go through late. Those 2 guys will certainly be in the mix.
Yeah, Chris, I just wanted to follow up on that. It's one of the things that I've been impressed with has been the way your point guards have played, and with a guy like Justice who has had that veteran experience, the seasons behind him. Have you seen him adjust and help Bruce in particular? Just
Justice?
Justice.
I think he likes that role. He likes being a bigger ball handler, bigger point guard. I think he embraces that. I think he's so it's exciting for him. I think to do that. I think he feels a little more even involved. He's got good play. He's got to limit his turnovers. He's got to play stronger at times. But I thought Justice, he's got to lead the way with his competitiveness every game. And I thought he led our team on Saturday with just his overall competitiveness.
Big Ten, it's been kind of a mixed bag. A lot of good wins and some tough losses some of the teams have taken. Just are you keeping one eye kind of on the other 13 teams in your league as you're looking at North Carolina and Maine and the teams you're playing, just what's your overall sense of what the Big Ten's going to be like when you get back into it?
Yeah, I mean, as we get into this week, our focus is really solely on Maine, but you do peek like on the weekend at how teams are doing, or you're getting ready for the game, and the Indiana Kansas game's on, so you're watching that a little bit. I think all in all, our league is kind of what we thought it would. It's a lot of really good teams. How many teams can get to whatever, that's for other people to talk about. But the depth of the league is, again, you had a Rutgers team play very well against Wake Forest, beat them pretty good. And we know Wake Forest is a good team. They won at Wisconsin. We played them in a scrimmage. So, you had a lot of teams that I think just a lot of really good teams in our league. And that's why there's going to be so many close games. So you do keep an awareness of it for sure. And, some surprise you. But that's the case in any league. But I think it validates what we felt all along. And this is a very, very deep league again.
You didn't have ice, so maybe a little bit more opportunities for McNeil and Holden and Roddy Gale, and didn't particularly get a ton of production out of those three. I think they played a combined 70 minutes and scored maybe 12 points, 14 points, something like that. Just what can you do individually to get maybe all three of those guys going in the right direction, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, they just have to keep getting better. Roddy's got to be a two-way player for us. Tanner, I thought he did some good things offensively. He's got to continue to grow defensively, and he's good on the glass and good offensively. Sean will be fine. They covered up Sean pretty well. I think he missed a couple open looks and needed to get up on the line early in the second half when he had that wide open look. But not worried about his or any of those two guys' offense. I think the game will start to slow down for Roddy, and you'll see his offense grow when that happens.
Hey, Coach. Freshmen Bryce and Bruce both enjoying career highs. Aside from Bruce's turnovers, how encouraging is it to see freshmen step up in a big stage, hostile environment like that, especially as you guys continue into a tough Big Ten play?
Yeah, no, it was really good, and it was hostile. It felt like that in a lot of ways, but it was good. I think we've seen really good things from those guys. In a lot of ways, really all four freshmen. They just impact in different ways. I think Bryce's impact is so obvious because of his scoring and how proficient he is as a scorer. But Bruce's ball handling, running our team, his just ability to impact the game has been tremendous. And I really like what Roddy and Felix have given us at times. So I'm pleased with those four guys. They are going to go through ups and downs. They're going to have struggling moments, and we have to be patient with them. And as long as they have the right attitude and approach, we got to keep playing them.
Are they maybe a little bit ahead of where you thought they'd be at this point?
Yeah, I've been asked that, and I try not to, you try not to put too much on kids. My biggest challenge for them this week is going to be, okay, hey, you're coming off a Saturday, we're playing a good team on Wednesday. You got Christmas right around the corner. How focused are we going to be on these next couple days and this game on Wednesday? Because that's sometimes where you see it really play itself out with young kids. Because it's been a full few months for them, but they're certainly at or a level above what we maybe anticipated for sure in terms of their production, and we've needed every bit of it.
You mentioned Carolina's press when they threw it at you late, and you've talked about how obviously their guards do so much for them. You've had teams pressure you at times this season. You've mostly handled it better than that. What did you see in those moments? Like, were you expecting? When we talked to Hubert after the game, he said they hadn't really pressured much because they don't want to wear his guys down. How prepared were you for that, and what did you see from your guys in some of those moments?
They did it late against Virginia Tech and really bothered them.
They cut the lead.
Yeah, really bothered them, and they didn't have Buckeye lot in that game. So they got down, and then they came back and cut it to a 1-point game at Virginia Tech, who's a good team. But so I did anticipate it. Looking back on it, I just wish we would have. I wish I would have maybe emphasized it a little bit more. They have not run it much, but as a coach, you're trying to project what could potentially bother you, and I thought that could if they stayed in it. And we had we've not been bothered much all year, but it was a little bit of a different press, and give them credit.
And in what way was it different? Is it just
it was a diamond press, and we've not seen that a whole lot. They had a guy on the ball, and Nance's length impacted us, and his ability to move on the ball impacted us. And the other presses we've seen have been more three-quarter, less heat on the ball.
And I know she just asked you, like, ahead of expectations and just kind of like what you thought about the team. You're 10 games in, half of them are against high major competition. You're 7-3. Like, is this in general, when you looked at all the question marks, where you thought you might be at this point, or what do you think about? You hit a round number 10 games in.
Yeah, ask me after Wednesday. And I'll maybe have an answer on that. I want to see how we respond these next couple days. From an emotional game and playing a good team. Maybe I'll have a better answer then, kind of where we're at right before Christmas.
I just had a general question about guys picking up too early fouls. When you think back to the Duke game, and Justice had the quick two, and then he sat for a good chunk of the first half, and then against Carolina, Bruce had two pretty quick ones, but it looked like he played through a good portion of the first half with those two, and he's a freshman, not a fifth, sixth-year senior. So when you're looking at guys in that situation, does it just kind of depend who we're playing, what the score is, the flow of the game, or how do you make those decisions?
Yeah, I'll play a guy with two fouls in the first half. In most cases, not every case, but in most cases I will. With Justice, the guy he was guarding, I believe at Duke, was a little bit more, and we didn't have another great matchup, but could be a little bit more susceptible to picking up his third. I did not think that was going to be as much of an issue with Bruce. I thought we could potentially hide him, so it was a little bit more matchup driven at that situation for playing those guys. Okay. All right, guys.
Thanks, Chris.